There's a major crisis facing healthcare facilities management. We have aging employees, aging buildings, and aging infrastructure. We've created the Healthcare Facilities Network, a content network designed specifically to help solve for these three pressing issues in healthcare facilities management. We bring on thought leaders and experts from across healthcare facilities management, all the way from the C-suite to the technician level, because at the end of the day, we're all invested in solving the aging issue. Thanks for tuning in. Look at our videos. You will find that as a theme across our content. This is the Healthcare Facilities Network. I'm your host, Peter Martin. Patrick Murphy, East Region President for CREF. Patrick, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pete. Excited to be here at long last.
At long last. Well, I've been trying to get you on for a long time. You're a tough guy to...
Busy person.
Busy, very busy person. But you know what? One of the busy things you've been working on is the rebranding for the Healthcare Facilities Network. So if you are a loyal listener or observer,
Yep.
you will notice that the visuals have changed and there's more visuals to come.
I have.
Why have we done that?
Well, we just don't think there's enough people listening, to be honest with you. We think it's a big problem. We think it's one of the biggest problems in the country. Healthcare is broken. One of the biggest problems with healthcare now is the fact that there's a huge crisis. Aging infrastructure, aging people, aging workforce, right? Aging buildings. It's all coming together in a perfect storm, and we don't have the generations coming in like the generations that are coming out, and it's creating a big gap. And that gap is creating a lot of issues, both from a patient safety perspective, to an environment of care perspective, to domino effects on how leadership at hospitals make prudent decisions. And for us, it's really our call to action. You know, I've been in this business doing this work for 25 years, and I've never seen it as concerning as it is today. And I think if more viewers, whether they're in healthcare or just people that live in the U.S. and know people that go to hospitals, I think this is super important, and it's a topic that doesn't get enough play. So that's why I think it's super important for us to ramp up what we're doing here, not just the logos, but just getting it out there through social media, just to get as many people curious about the problem and, ultimately, hopefully see a call to action to try to help the problem, right? Because it's not going away, not in the next 5 or 10 years.
It is not going away. And we are on X, and we are on Facebook, and we do have a new LinkedIn page, and we've got a new look on our YouTube. What do you think about our new look?
I think it's great. I mean, I think with what interests people today, when most people are on feeds and they're scrolling, right? You need something to capture your eye in whatever my daughter needs. 7 seconds, and if you don't catch it, you've missed it, right? And then that's the hook. It's like trying to throw a lure in the water for 7 seconds and pulling it out. It better be a shiny lure. So for that reason, I think that the branding itself and the style, even though you are a handsome guy and what you were doing was very grassroots, we've invested a lot in trying to grassroots. Yeah, we're just trying to get the word out there, and I think that's the first step.
So you didn't like my white screen and my picture from Marquette University and me sitting in front of it?
I loved it. I just thought that maybe there's a few little pockets of the population that may not like Marquette, specifically, folks like me that are Syracuse fans. You don't want to lose people before they even start.
We do not want to. And you know what? Along those lines,
pickleball. I mean, who doesn't like pickleball?
So if nobody ever knew that like you just told them it was pickleball, people prior might have thought, hey, that's a cool trophy, but now you've kind of given it away.
Yeah, it is not a Nobel Prize for those that can't see it.
So Patrick has an interesting background. He's the Eastern Region President for CREF, but you're a civil engineer.
Right.
By education. You started in civil engineering, working for Turner, but then you kind of jumped industries. You get into healthcare. You're a project manager. You've worked your way all the way up. You've done most things in the PDC world and healthcare leadership. You've worked for hospitals and organizations. You've been around, as you said, for 25 years. What has changed?
Well, let me take a step back, because what initially interested me in this type of work is that it's a regulated discipline. So healthcare is regulated, right? Finance is regulated. Life sciences is regulated, right? I started nuclear work as a project manager, which is about as regulated as it's going to get. And I was down in Peekskill. I was replacing steam generators in nuclear plants that were failing because back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they didn't build them to withstand the amount of time they needed to service. And they were starting to have an infrastructure issue, right? And they weren't planned to, the planned obsolescence, which is a great word for anyone that's listening, was not made for that early, late 90s, 2000s turnover. And what I found was it was also coming along with a really challenging time in the U.S. where nuclear power was starting to become really taboo, right? And you'll probably notice there aren't a lot of active nuclear plants now. And a lot of that is because there was some challenges at places like 3 Mile Islands where you had, regulation through the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, doing what they could, but the country in general was worried about private enterprise and not doing the ethical thing, and as the result, when you skimp on certain things, you get things like 3 Mile Island, which changes the trajectory of something even as big as a power an energy source that could be well managed properly, a really, really big thing for the U.S. And we're probably going to see an increase of that in the future as they get safer. But coming in as a field engineer in 1999, the first thing that I learned about was how important it is, even though when you see it at the first glance, making sure you document things. Regulation is something that's there for a reason, and it can be very, very challenging and frustrating unless you understand what it's tied to. And, getting that initial, when I was green, getting that initial experience kind of stayed with me and led me to another regulated market in healthcare. And it was super important to me to continue in that market.
What's an experience that you took out of your nuclear days that stays with you?
I would say pride of work, pride of ownership of the work you're doing. It was a different time. I was going in very green.
Yeah.
And I really, if I was to say, what I take out of that was how to be an apprentice, how to have somebody that's been in the game, because there's a lot of pitfalls. I mean, you need to gown up, you need to have a work plan to go get a crescent wrench in containment, because it's so dangerous to take that crescent wrench out of containment. So, when you're learning, you really need guidance, right? And there was a lot of folks that I met for those years that I was in that industry that, really shaped the way that I solve problems and the way I do things, pretty methodically, and then I think, a lot of engineers feel that way where, sometimes you want to do you want to get there the fastest, and it might be the right short-term decision, but ultimately, you need people around you to help mentor you into just getting a different frame of mind.
So there's a lot of ties between your answer and where we are in healthcare today. But before we get to that, in the recruiting world and when I was doing the straight recruiting, I'd often work for hospitals. And I'd hear a lot that mentorship, succession planning, it wasn't always occurring for a variety of reasons. I mean, part of it might be the busyness of the world, but the other part of it, and I think this is to the human condition, sometimes people don't like to give back to others what they know because they look at that as a threat. Am I working myself out of my job? If I give up what I know, what happens to me? They can become very territorial, and anybody who's watching this from healthcare knows that that's the point. Was that not the experience in nuclear? Were folks who worked in the nuclear industry willing and able and guiding you?
Yeah, and I think it's funny because I think it's where you are in your life. So I think if you look at it in quartiles, I was on the early quartile, the beginning quartile. And then a lot of the folks that were in this work had been doing it because they were the ones that designed it in the 60s and 70s. So at the time, they were 60 and 70, right? 50, 60, 70. And I think as you get older in your profession, something flips where you want to teach The succession strategy, you want to, you know that you want to leave a legacy, whether you call it one or not. You want to leave it in a better place than where it was when you got there. And like today, I'm 46 years old. I am in the middle where I'm constantly worried about somebody either taking our secret sauce, or worried about, I don't know, potentially missing an opportunity to grow, to provide to my young 8-year-old twin. So for me, I think the dynamic is driven on just brackets of age and where you are in your career. And I think I was in a really unique position back then, because a lot of the folks that were my mentors weren't 10 years older than me. They were 30, 40 years older than me.
So you weren't a threat.
I was not a threat, no.
It's interesting. You talk about quartiles of life. Before we recorded this, I was actually talking to an old contact of mine from the recruiting world. He's my age. He's 58.
You were ready to, you didn't want to.
I know. Well, you know
he
why?
was 27.
You know why? Because like in the recruiting world, and I think this is why people have trusted me, and you know this because I've told you this before, I try to be a vault. I don't tell anything anybody tells me. If I go around blabbing that to people, then you're out of business, because you need to be trusted, and you need to, when people tell you things, they need to know it's not going anywhere. But this isn't what I'm going to tell you isn't discoverable. But he was saying exactly what you see. He's like, I'm 58, 59 years old. He's like, I don't need to be the top guy anymore. He's like, I don't want to be the top guy anymore. I don't want them calling me 24/7. I am content to take a step back, to mentor, to do my job. And he was worried. He's like, how do I tell prospective employers that without them saying, I'm not going to hire this guy because he's not motivated?
100%. And I think just adding on to that, what is leadership? Leadership is having a team that can deliver the force multiplier, right? And I think as you get closer to the latter quartile of your career, you're trying to change your work-life balance, right? You're starting to get to a point where you're considering, part-time employment, right? And if you've done a good job with, being a mentor, and you are, you're able to lead, you create a better opportunity post full-time work, because you've literally created something, in terms of an infrastructure that's very highly efficient, very predictable, and allows you to, even if it's just taking calls 8 hours a day, you can work your way into taking calls 8 hours a week, and then eventually 4 hours a week, and then eventually on the golf course or on the tuna boat. And I feel like that's something that, is super important to us here, because I don't think there's a lot of folks that came up, at least in my upbringing, and I think in the facilities world, that can just turn it off, right?
Yes.
And whether they know it or not, because they came through a time when training and mentoring was super important, they leave a very long-lasting imprint in people's minds, and they'll always be that person. And you can create a consulting business on that. So I kind of just wanted to piggyback on that, because I think that's important. Leadership doesn't always happen because you're trying to do it at 46. It becomes more natural when you're starting to create a team that you've built and you've spent the time to try to train.
Yeah. And it's funny, you're kind of seeing the gray in his answer. And when you work with HR departments, I would always try to express that the world's not black and white, and candidates aren't black and white. And
Right.
you need to look at each candidate who comes forward on their own. And a person, we can be so, you got to get to that next career ladder. You got to keep moving on. Well, not everybody wants that. And those people who don't want that are just as valuable as the people who want it. But I would try to. It was frustrating for me sometimes with HR. I'm not trying to pick on HR here, but they couldn't or wouldn't want to understand that and just take each person individually for what they offer.
Yeah, and I think that what did you hear when you were in your 20s and your 30s? You don't know what you don't know. I don't think people are making informed decisions on what they want yet, because they just don't know the full spectrum of information yet. You have to mature, right? And I think that's a big piece of it. Being able to really understand the program. Programs are so important. We'll talk about preserving institutional knowledge a lot, and we're probably going to jump ahead because this is one of our big points here at the Healthcare Facilities Network, but preserving institutional knowledge is so important, And quite frankly, what ends up happening is and I'm not going to get too generationalist here, but people are learning things in a very different way, right? Like I'm a Gen X guy. I like to think of myself as a referee in an NBA game, right?
They're not very good.
Millennials and Gen Zs are 3 times, 4 times, I don't know, cite the source, how many times bigger Gen X is. And the baby boomers are equally as big, right? So, I've had the luck of being able to kind of see both. I was an analog guy growing up in a digital world, right? But what I'm finding is that, and this is something you're probably going to add to, but people don't want the same things coming in that are in their 30s, right? Things are a lot more software driven, things are a lot more work-life balance driven, and that's just completely different than what a lot of the folks that have been doing it for 40 years are ready to or prepared to kind of train against. And I think that is a huge problem right now, because what ends up happening is, because things turn quickly, the average person leaves within a couple years. You just don't have the time to really understand what you don't know.
Right.
And we're not connecting the dots. We're not driving people to get to a common layer where they're actually speaking to each other and not, around, about, among, across each other.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And we've done our millennial roundtable on the Healthcare Facilities Network. We have our group of great millennials that we talk to and get their insights. But before we go kind of to that generational thing, now Patrick is extremely passionate about the whole mission of the Healthcare Facilities Network: aging buildings, aging infrastructure, aging employees. And I do want to get to that because I do want to tie it all to the HFN. But let's go back. Let's talk about you for a sec. You left us on nuclear power.
Yep.
You jump over to healthcare because you're talking about you appreciated the regulatory mindset.
Yes.
What's that? So you jump into healthcare. What did you find? What hooked you? Why are you still here? And why did you want to? We talk about career ladders.
Yeah.
You're obviously following a pretty good career ladder. Tell us a little bit about that evolution.
Yeah. So it started with more, what do they call it? Opportunity is the cross section of luck, or what is it? Oh yeah, opportunity is the intersection between luck and availability, or some version of that, where I was in a really lucky position leaving the nuclear world when it was starting to go down in terms of there wasn't a lot of business. And the transferable skills really, when I went to work at Turner Construction Company here in New England back in the early 2000s, like, it had a lot of those transferable skills, infectious control, task planning, pre-construction risk assessments, lots of that same undertone of, you got to be able to make sure you're planning ahead, right? Measure twice, cut once. And that transferable skill made me pretty successful early. And because I'm an engineer, I'm really pragmatic in how I do things. So process isn't unnatural to me. So I kind of landed in a position where I would do things in a way that I could communicate well. And it allowed me to kind of grow from being a field engineer at Sturdy Memorial Hospital down in Attleboro.
Hello, Dan.
Yeah, Dan Boyer, that's for you. And if anything's wrong with that chiller plant, it has been 20 years, so you're out of warranty. Don't call. But then ultimately what happened was I started gaining more skills. I stayed in that niche. And again, there is a benefit of being in a niche because it's institutional knowledge, right?
I'm going to jump in for 1 second. So you have a great skill. Like, you're an interesting person with kind of your skill set, because you're an engineer, you're process driven, but you're also very creative.
Yeah.
And you're also able to kind of think beyond process, right? And he also I tell you this all the time. So we kind of bounce around this office. It's one of the benefits of doing in-person work. It's great to be in the office because you get a lot done informally. Just
casual collisions.
Absolutely. All the time. And so, your analogies are fantastic. They always make me think a little bit, but your skill set it's kind of unique in that way. I'm not saying this because I report to you. I told you this when we worked together years ago.
Well, you'll see something extra in your paycheck this week.
Thank you. But you don't have engineers. I mean, sometimes that's difficult for an engineer. Were you always wired this way, or did it evolve as you moved up?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think, yeah. I mean, I'm definitely I'm more of an extrovert. But it was funny. I I fully tapped into, I wasn't one of those people that loved science and loved math early on.
Oh, really?
But I really, I was very big into like role models and emulating role models. And that was one of the things that I think helped me, because I would emulate people where I really admired something that they did.
Who was a person you emulated?
So there was a guy named Griffin Ryder who was in 11th grade when I was in 9th grade that he was on the basketball team too. I was never that good at basketball, but I really liked the way he went about things. He was really good at math. He might have had a little more skill in being able to actually sit down and read, where I was more one of those people that, would learn in a different way, but just emulating what he was going to be. And like he wanted to be a civil engineer. And
So in 9th grade, you're cognizant of that.
yeah, which is strange.
It is.
And it led me into kind of being a little bit unique, even going into college, because I still had that in me, right? It was this emulation that allowed me to want to go into different disciplines that may not have been something that either whoever my guidance counselors were, or my parents would tell me it would be the right thing to do. I just emulated something that I really liked, and I liked where the outcome was going to go.
It's interesting.
So it was weird in a way, because I did kind of, now that you look backwards, I'm kind of a little different, like in the way that I approach things.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good skill set, because you kind of have to be able to do that in my position. Like you got to have a little bit of distraction, and you've got to keep look through the forest, but be able to look through the forest through the trees. And you can do that when you're not laser focused or myopically focused on a certain way to learn. So I think that's probably like the impetus as to how I got to where I did.
If you like this video, please like and subscribe to the network. And more importantly, share it with your colleagues in the healthcare industry. Together, we can solve the aging crisis that's impacting all of us. It's interesting because when we started out recruiting, I joined Jack 12 or 13 years ago, and we'd often work with a healthcare organization, and they would say, I need an engineer who can communicate.
Right.
And so that's evolved, from 12 or 13 years ago, from I need an engineer who can communicate, to now it's almost like the engineer in some ways needs to be able to communicate almost better than the technical knowledge, which I think we've gone a little too far in that regard.
Well, but I've got a real life scenario with this. So going back to the first thing we were discussing on this was, so I started as a project manager, then I ended up going and becoming an owner's project manager. So if you think about who you're interacting with in percentages, when I'm on a construction site, right, I'm dealing with people that 75% of the people I'm talking to, maybe more, are technical. Yeah. So I can communicate technically to them. As you move up the ranks, that percentage reduces, and because the people you're talking to, their goals are larger, right? You're talking to operating officers, people that are in finance. You're dealing with people that might be in marketing. You're dealing with people that might be in government affairs. And it's funny, as I grew through the ranks, and specifically, when I was running the real estate and projects for a big hospital system, where it was 75%, maybe even 85% when I was in the field, it actually flips. So, and it can be frustrating, because only 10% of the people you're talking to, or even 10% of what you're saying, can be actually absorbed. It's like if your Magic Johnson in the back of the pass looks great, it's useless if the person doesn't catch the pass. I found that, and that's where I think the analogies came in, like being able to communicate the right thing to the right audience without them knowing nearly enough. Yeah. That was one of my biggest challenges. I had and you might even have mentioned, this would be a good story, but one of the people that I worked with right off the bat when I was working on the owner side was I had to work with a very, very busy system level facilities guy. And me being an engineer and a talker, and I don't mind writing a full novel as an email, because I didn't know what the person wanted. So instead of me asking the question, I would just give anything that he might need. And over the course of a couple months, he came to me and he said, Pat, he said, you're on probation. You're on email probation. I said, what does that mean? He said, I'm going to teach you that you need to get your point across in the subject line of the email. And I'll tell you, you can start using the body again. And it taught me that if you can't distill or synthesize the point you're trying to make to somebody that doesn't, and where the priority of your email falls in their world, you don't know where that is. He wanted me to put it in that subject line, and I had to graduate to explaining what that subject line was. It was almost like having Mrs. Masterson in 7th grade teaching me how to do an essay. But that's the type of thing you need to get conditioned to do, because the people, your audience is so important, because the past won't get caught.
Yeah.
So just a unique kind of perspective. And then when you get to a position where I'm today, I'm kind of dealing with all of those audience members, right? People that need a deep dive like a Falcon to come in and help really, really technically. And then maybe an hour later, as you've seen, I might need to be, pitching an opportunity to try to solve a big problem for a client.
That's a great story. And that's really a skill set. We talk about like transferable skills and things that you need to learn on the job. And that's actually, I'm working with one of our clients now to develop a presentation about, and it's, you hit on a lot of different things, because in healthcare facilities today, there's almost like two different segments, right? We have the old people. I might be there, but the older folks who have worked 45 years for a hospital, right? I mean, they're still out there. They're still facility folks who get up on a ladder every day, and they've done it for 45 years, and that's all they've done. And that's great, and they're still working, and we still need them because they're that repository of knowledge. But then we have the younger folks coming in who have no work experience whatsoever. And they've grown up with phones and computers, but they don't have like that executive presence yet, or they don't understand, or they don't yet know that we need to tailor our approach as we go up in the different, with different levels of the organization. So we're working with them now on that. But how long did it take you to develop that? That I think I know who you're talking about, the person who told you I'm the email.
We worked together at one point.
Yes.
So maybe you were right after.
No, I do know
Who I'm talking about.
do.
Great guy, by the way, down in
Yes.
Florida.
I was going to
Real
say,
estate, good guy.
Yes. Yep. I know exactly who you're talking about. And that's a great lesson. How long did it take you, though, to get to that point where you could synthesize into an...
Yeah.
Because that's a mindset shift.
Well,
And a
I
big
think,
one.
yeah, so that's an example, but I think I want to zoom out a little bit, because I think one thing that allowed me to be able to communicate at different levels is it's all about practical, right? Like I've had to be in the seat around the table, basically in every one of the seats. I've been a designer,
Yep.
I've been a construction manager, I've been the owner's rep, and I've been the owner. And that's lucky. Like you don't typically get to go around the table in a 10-year interval, but what that allows you to do is understand what you are the other audience. You know what it's like to be in those shoes.
Yeah.
So inherently it was easier for me because I knew it. Like I first had to learn it through that little exercise that I was given, but a few years later, when I ended up taking his position, then I really got it because I realized that those percentages are, you have 10 things that occupy 10%. And it's really, really hard because everyone is very busy and people are busy for very different reasons. For you to be able to identify what that person needs, it does take experience, or I think without having the experience yourself, where I was lucky to have that, you need to be mentored in that example I told you before.
Yep.
Where you really genuinely need to know what it's like to put those goggles on. Like you need to understand that, and you need experience to do that. And it's either going to happen practically, it's going to happen in the lab, or it's going to happen through somebody coaching you. And there needs to be more of the coaching, because the folks that are mentoring, I get concerned every day. Like in 5 years, a lot of those people that can do it practically and give the little stress test that I was given, those people just aren't going to be there anymore. And the people that have been around for 5 years in an institution like they're really going to be able to give you what you need quickly. But with the revolving door we're seeing now, people don't even know what the glasses, the prescription of the glasses they're wearing are half the time.
I know.
So, and that's really anecdotal. I really mean that by they don't really have an understanding of their own role and responsibility enough to be able to communicate what they need.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why I want to kind of go to your background, to as we fast forward to HfN Healthcare Facilities Network, the things we're passionate about, the aging buildings, the aging infrastructure, the aging employees. But it's very important to know, and when I want to talk about your career, the background of the people who are telling you about these issues. So you have sat in that chair before.
100%.
So you know what it's like to be behind budget, behind schedule, and to have a doctor screaming at you. You know that from a PM perspective and from a president perspective. You've got it from both ends. But tell me, as you look and as we look at the core mission and what we're really excited about, and it was one of the reasons that I wanted to actually join CREF. Just a quick story. So Patrick and I worked together. And so when I was at Gosselin Martin Associates about a year ago, maybe 14 months ago now, we're developing the Healthcare Facilities Network because there's a huge problem. We need to publicize that we need just people, right? This role isn't even publicized enough. So we need to publicize that it's there and then draw people in. So I meet with Patrick. We have lunch here in Boston, and I wanted to try to monetize it. And I know you can't monetize through hospitals and systems because they don't have any money, right? They can't hire people. They're certainly not going to monetize through a YouTube channel that is me recording in front of a white screen. And so, Patrick and I started talking, and I was talking about CREF and would these guys be interested? And just through the course of our conversation, Patrick's like, hey, we're hiring for a VP of Business Development. Do you know anybody? And so he sends me the job description. One thing leads to another. I'm like, okay, I think you guys are looking for somebody like me. I joined CREF. It's been a great opportunity for me, but we're also passionate around this healthcare facilities network because it's such a huge issue. And if we don't have people, we can't operate hospital buildings. It's that dire. That's not an exaggeration. Tell me from your perspective, why are you so focused on this aging issue? What is it that captures you and draws you in?
So there's two parts to it, right? I think the first thing is like I have experience in, I'm a project manager, right? And for me,
are you a project manager at Hartsville, do you think?
Yeah, 100%. A problem solver, right? A project manager is a problem solver. And what I found across my career is that we're brought in to solve a problem, but usually the initial touch with the person that's providing you what the problem is doesn't know what the problem is. How many times have I said it's not the end date to a project, it's the start date that kills you? Most of the time they can tell. It's like they know they're in the deep water. You'll hear I say, oh, you're on the deep end a lot. They're not able to articulate the problem enough to be able to have a solution driven to them in a way that they can digest it. So that to me is one of the things that brought me to this, because I don't think the general masses know the problem. And when I say that, I mean people will try to solve an ancillary problem. Again, root cause. Like I'm a big fan of root cause analysis, and you're going to find that we'll see ancillary needs, right? You'll hear that somebody's looking for somebody to help them with being a maintenance tech, or there's frustrations because that maintenance tech keeps flipping over, right? And what they're asking you to do is either, in your case, which was frustrating, bring somebody in that's going to stick for 5 years, right? Or they're going to need some support from a complementary way from a third party to help build that up, because the product of it isn't, there's concerns from a financial perspective, from an environmental care perspective, and the first thing I think about is it's the same problem. People don't know the problem they're asking to solve. They're only seeing one layer of it, the tip of the iceberg. And I think that for us at CREF, the aging issue is the biggest issue that we have in the country in healthcare, period. Like there's all sorts of other things, but, and we focus on facilities, but it's nurses, it's doctors, it's everybody. And you say to yourself, well, why is that happening? And it's generational. It's the waiting for the software train and the technology train to come pick us up and take us to somewhere successful, and still waiting. There's all of these reasons as to why it's not more clear. But ultimately, the first goal for me is to get it out there. Like, we need to have the market understand what they need. And selfishly, until that happens, they're not going to know that CREF, our mission, right, is to solve these problems at any cost, right? To evaluate the problem, assess the problem, understand what's important, and then come back with recommendations. That's why we always baseline and analyze the situation before we respond to what the client thinks the problem is. So for me, the best way for people to know what the problem is to ramp up your subscriptions on YouTube by 10x, because then people are going to start talking, and they're going to start to understand that the infrastructure is going to keep going south. The people working on that infrastructure is going to keep going south, and the buildings themselves are going to continue to deteriorate. No better of an example than here in Massachusetts, here in Boston. So until you really understand what the root causes are, you can't create a plan to solve them.
And you know what's interesting is, obviously we're running a business here at CREF, but that, we created the healthcare facilities network because truly we got to solve this somehow. And I was talking to a person recently, and I think this is where hospitals hurt themselves. I understand why they do it. It's about money, it's about employees, it's about overhead. I get it, but they shoot themselves in the foot. He was telling me, he knows of a large organization that completely wiped away their middle management, laid off all their managers. And,
solving a problem before they know what the problem is.
Right. And also completely eliminating a future. I think the biggest problem we have in the field is we've cut costs so much. We've gotten rid of managers. We've gotten rid of supervisors. So you have directors and employees, and there's nothing between them. And we've eliminated that funnel of people who go up that career: supervisor, manager, director, right?
Well, and it's
manager,
rich.
Director, and we've gotten rid of it.
Right.
And it doesn't exist. And that's part of a huge problem we have now.
No,
we worked it out.
No, and that's a good way to put it, because the first thing I thought of is, we think of this big valley, right? And just snapshot of today, right? We're like, we got to bridge that valley, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the things CREF tries to do: bridge the valley with a program. The problem is the two bridge abutments that support that bridge are going farther and farther away from each other. So it's going to continue to be harder and harder.
Yeah.
Right? So totally agree. Like, biggest problem we've got.
And I tried to think, and it's one of the, we talk about this on a lot of our episodes. Like, what's the solution? What's the solution to that? I don't know what it is.
Well, I think it starts with assessing what you're dealing with, right? I think, it's really funny because, I say, when clients come to us, they come to us with some pretty unique requests, right? We've heard, we may need to outsource. Would you guys outsource? Would you be our outsourced partner? And what a lot of companies that strictly do outsourced work to help supplement or complement a program would be like, sure, that's what we do. We're in the business to do that. But even recently, you asked the question, like, hey, your organization has a pride and a brand reputation of being the best in what they do. And to me, it just doesn't sound like outsourcing meets your mission, your vision, your goals. Like, is that really what you want to be doing? And sometimes you have to do a gut check there, because just recently, one of our clients said, you know what, that's not at all what we want to be doing. We want the people internal. But how are we going to do that?
Yeah.
We can't get the resumes in. We can't keep people here. We didn't think there was another way to solve it. And I said, I said, well, it would be terrible for you to marginalize what you've been known for,
Right.
just because you're settling on what you think the only solution is. So that's where I start. And then we start an assessment and we say, what's the problem here? Do we need to polish off your program because the people coming in don't see the work-life balance in it, don't think they're going to get clear direction, see something chaotic and just step away from it? Or are you somewhere where there's not a lot of folks or candidates locally, and you're just not showing them something desirable enough to come to relocate their young family to, right? And in a lot of cases, that means this is a longer term, this is a strategic, not a tactical solution, right? And that's what this whole thing is for us. And that's what we've been building, right? It takes education. It takes, like I always like to say, like it's a boat, it's a sailboat. You need it to sail, but you've got holes in it right at the dock. Sometimes to get people interested, the first thing you got to do is get rid of that immediate problem, which is, why don't we put some epoxy, rub some two-part epoxy together, fill the hole in the boat for you so you can at least listen to us about what our analysis is. And then once we slowly take off from that port, we'll then start building it to what it needs to be. And then in 3 years, we're back to where you really want it to be. Instead of spending 3 years with an outsource group, right? Because sometimes it's a 3-year contract, and realizing their goal is to continuously turn staffers, right? People staffing jobs. That isn't preserving institutional knowledge, right? That's just keeping the boat afloat.
Patrick, that's a good point, because, and it's nothing against outsourcing, because there's tons of good outsourcers out there. But the reality is they can't find people either.
Yeah,
so what you are doing is you are putting the responsibility on them to find people. So that does get offloaded from you. But we are all fishing from the same, I was going to say the same flock of fish.
Well, and just
Not a flock of fish, though, right? It'd have to be a school of fish.
Like healthcare is specialized and it's regulated. Like, and I read the book Blink, 10,000 hours. You're not allowed to fly alone on an airplane unless you have 10,000 hours of burn time and training. That's because you have people's lives at stake. It's no different in a hospital, in a regulated hospital. If you don't have the ability to understand and to gather that information and to store it for the next group, you're putting everybody at risk, right? So it's super important that people identify that, a turnstile will not work in a regulated, whether it's the nuclear world, whether it's even life sciences, big pharma, right? Whether it's financial, whether it's healthcare, you've got to be able to understand and carry that institutional knowledge as a noun. It's a thing that you need to, like the torch in the Olympics, carry along. And it's just very hard to do that when you've got people running in every 10 feet.
Yeah.
You got to figure out a way to keep that light going,
I mean, when I started just in the recruiting world, forget when I started working, but in recruiting, we would look 8 to 10 years at a person, right? They got to stay 8 to 10 years before you move on. Gradually over time, that made it to 5 years. Now it's like 1 to 2 years, and that's not even over exaggeration. I still talk to VPs of HR, and I've had some tell me if I can get a good year or two out of a person, I tell my people to hire them. It's that level, and it all plays in to the chaos we're seeing, right? It's like this soup, and there's all these different ingredients. You can't solve for just one thing.
Well,
there's multiple things that are killing us.
Anecdotally, that's like saying, well, you did 2,000 hours, go fly that Cessna.
Yeah, absolutely.
To me, that scares me.
Absolutely. So as we come to the close of my conversation with Patrick Murphy in our palatial studios, as we look at the HfN, I can tell you from my perspective, just with the Healthcare Facilities Network, it's a long slog ahead. There's no magic bullet that is coming. There is no magic savior that's coming. It's kind of, it has to be a grassroots effort for you who's watching this, for you who's sitting here, where we just publicize the opportunity, reach down into high schools, get people excited that you can work in a hospital. And it's always been, for me, it's the strangest thing, right? Because we all go into hospitals starting when we're a year old. Every point in your life you're in a hospital, yet you never know that there's a career in this hospital other than nurses, doctors, admins. Yeah. You never think, I can be a facilities person. Don't even know the career exists. What can we do to turn that around? And how do we do that on the Healthcare Facilities Network?
Well, I think it's going to be part of what we're doing, right? The whole idea of this is to broaden the awareness of the challenge, and inherently we'll be able to show people what this business is about. It's been incredibly successful. I've listened to all of your YouTubes, and everybody in it has a lot of pride, right? Yeah. But not people don't know. People don't know. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get it out into the market, get as many people aware of it as possible, because that is when people start realizing this is actually a real challenge. And then when you get constituencies leaning in, changes are made, right? Because of awareness. A decision that isn't an informed one is just yet another, incomplete step, in my opinion. So inform.
Going back to the project manager roots.
Constantly. It's always there.
Absolutely. Any, well, you're paying the bill. Any final thoughts?
No, I'm really excited. I think the next 3 months are going to be exciting. We're already starting to see the casts get better, the pods get better, and we're going to tirelessly continue to plow ahead because it's the most important thing to CREF. I think it's the most important thing to healthcare, and I think a lot of people are going to really lean in, and you're going to find that it's going to become a community very quickly.
Yeah, no, that's the goal. And I met with a group. So we were at the Texas Association of Healthcare Facility Managers Conference back in April. And I happened and very fortuitously sat with a professor from Texas A&M. He was there with 3 of his students. And he's within their construction management department. But he brings them to healthcare conferences so that they can kind of see that there's opportunity out there. And they're going to be on our network next month. And I would encourage people who are listening, even if you think, well, I have nothing to do with healthcare facilities, reach out to us. Shoot us an email. Maybe you can become a guest on the network, but maybe you can help us advance in this goal because we need people.
Yeah, and I think that getting certified as a facilities manager is challenging. It's one of the most important positions that you could have. And you can't even get credit for it when you're co-oping in your junior and senior year.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on with that? Get people learn. Like, I learned engineering and went through practicals when I was a junior and a senior. Like, there's just a lot of things that a lot of people can do with awareness to just get more people in the business. The maritime colleges are fantastic for it. It'd be an easy transition. Engineering school, same thing. Construction management, same thing. Vocational high school, same thing. It's just getting it out there so people know it's something that's never going to go away. We need healthcare, and it's broken. So you have a great opportunity to jump in and be part of something and have your DNA on it at a time when it's really needed.
So as always, Peter Martin and
Patrick Murphy.
Thank you very much. For the Healthcare Facilities Network, as always, thank you for watching. We will be back with another episode. Thanks. If you want to be a guest on a future episode of the Healthcare Facilities Network, go to healthcarefacilitiesnetwork.com and let us know who you are and what you want to talk about, because together we can solve this critical aging issue.